Hey everybody, how's it going? It's Chris, the Urban Bourbonist, coming to you live from the Urban Bourbon Bunker here in Chicago. Thank you for joining me tonight. It's going to be a fun conversation with Joe Henry from J. Henry and Sons Distilling. They are out of Dane, Wisconsin. So it'll be fun to talk to another craft distiller and get some perspective on what they're doing and how they see the market going. I did want to show you guys my t-shirt here. It says being nice is cool. So I just wanted to show you that because being nice is cool. So Wisconsin straight bourbon whiskey is what we're going to talk about tonight with Joe Henry. And Joe is one of the sons in J. Henry and Sons. It looks like he just joined, so we'll probably be bringing him in here in a minute. And we'll get to talking, and we're going to do some tasting. And here he is. Let me bring him in. Joe, are you there? I cannot see you at this point, but it says it's waiting for you. So maybe you'll pop up here in a second. There you are.
All right, we're live.
How's everything? Yes, we are live. This is live on Instagram.
Oh man, is the lighting okay over here? I'm new to this.
Yeah, I can see you well. Everything looks good.
Awesome.
We've got a bunch of people that have joined us here to watch our conversation tonight. I think a lot of people are excited to hear from you and to learn more about J. Henry and Sons. But I was just reading, I wanted to ask you, I was just reading something, and I don't know how old the article was, but it says that you live in Chicago. Do you live in Chicago?
Yeah, I do actually. So I'm I'm very local, but seeing as that I'm the only sales rep for my family business, I kind of travel around quite a bit.
Yeah. So where do you live in Chicago?
Near Wicker Park.
Okay, I'm over in the West Loop.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Well, we hang out every time we meet at events, so we'll have to make that a trend.
Yeah, absolutely. So you and I met briefly at the Indie Spirits Expo here in Chicago. I visited your booth and we chatted just for a couple of minutes, and I invited you on the show and kind of explained to you there in the short time we had what it was all about. And you're like, oh yeah, I'm all about it. That's really cool. And I was like, okay, this is awesome. I had your card. I'm like, I'll follow up with Joe in a couple of days. And next thing I know, I think it was like the next day, I had an email from you.
Yeah.
So I thought that was pretty cool, and so we worked out the day to do this, and I think it'll be really fun for everybody to learn about your business. So
yeah, definitely.
Tell us a little bit. Let me just introduce you here for a second because a lot of people have come into the room. So for everyone that's come in, I'm talking to Joe Henry. He is the owner, sales lead, and blending specialist for J. Henry and Sons.
A little bit of everything.
He does a little bit of everything. And you guys the actual facility is in Dane, Wisconsin, correct?
Yeah, our third generation family farm is about 20-30 minutes directly north of Madison.
Okay, great. Did you go to the University of Wisconsin?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Roll badge.
There you go. My son went there, so I'm very familiar.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So the family farm is there in Dane, just outside of Madison, and it's been in the family for a really long time. I read since like the late 40s.
Yeah, correct.
And can you give us a little background on like the family history with the farm, and then like what led your dad to decide, hey, let's make bourbon?
Yeah, definitely. So the farm has been in our family since 1946 when my grandfather Jerry purchased it primarily as a seed farm. We used to actually have our own seed line, which we sold off about 20 years ago. And now we're really more of a contract grower. So that has been our primary source of business as a family since they purchased the farm. We now own about 2,000 acres of land throughout south central Wisconsin, from our home farm to Spring Green and all the way up north through Adams County, for those of you that are familiar with south central Wisconsin. So our primary source of business has always been hybrid seed corn. And what that is really taking two different strains. So the easiest example I can give you is you have a parent strain A, which has favorable traits. Maybe it's as simple as being a little bit more resistant to frost. And strain B.
Joe, we're losing your sound. Can everybody hear here?
And we want to create a hybrid that has both of the traits of those two strains. So you have one male row and you grow 4 female rows alongside of it. So if anybody's looking for a better line of work, fellas out there, I always say try and be a corn stalk because you get surrounded by 4 females. So what we do is then we grow those 5 different varietals together, and essentially through a lot of labor and production, we're able to create a hybrid that has both of the traits from parent strain A and B, creating new parent strain AB. So there's a lot more science and genetics involved in farming these days than most people are familiar with.
So your family has a long history then with corn, and that is something I wanted to talk to you about with your bourbon, because you guys are using a very unique corn to make your bourbon. It's a heirloom red corn that was developed by the University of Wisconsin way back in like the 30s, right?
Yeah. So can you see that here? Let me turn some more lights on it here. I think it'll really help a little bit.
All right. So guys, while Joe's doing that, just to reintroduce him, I'm talking with Joe Henry from J. Henry and Sons out of Dane, Wisconsin. This is one of their bottles. We'll be tasting this later. By the way, beautiful bottles. So Joe is the blending specialist. He's owner. He's sales lead. He's man of many duties for the company. So back to the red corn. So you guys are using this very unique heirloom red corn. Nobody else is using it, and it was developed by the University of Wisconsin. So tell us a little bit about that corn, and like what does that corn? How does that corn affect the bourbon in a unique way?
Totally. So I've actually got a little sample bottle of it right here. So hopefully everybody can see that. This is a accurate representation of our mash bill, which is 60% of this red heirloom corn, actually varietal W225A, which I'll get into in a minute. So 60% of that, 14% wheat, 14% rye, and 12% malted barley, making it a really complex 4-grain bourbon. So going back to W225A, this specific varietal, I don't know if anybody can see that, but this was a varietal that was actually developed in 1939 by the UW-Madison Ag Research Department in a very similar way that what I just described to you all. So essentially what they did was they created this hybrid to be an ideal varietal to be used as feed corn for local cattle. So it was more nutritious and just healthier for seed corn, primarily in the dairy industry because we are in Wisconsin as well. So my grandpa, when he bought the farm, Jerry Henry, in 1946, actually raised this specific varietal on our property.
Okay.
He sold it then to local farmers around the area who proceeded to feed their cattle with it. We did this for about 30 years until the 70s came around. And along with other things becoming really, really popular, GMOs was among that list. So genetically modified corn, which is really the majority of what seed corn production is today. So this varietal, not being a GMO varietal, was about a fifth as efficient as some of those more progressive crops.
Yeah, so
So
you're
essentially,
not getting much out of the acreage that it's planted in.
correct. So when we're talking about yields, we yield about 65 bushels per acre, and nobody needs to know what that is. It's not going to be on your bourbon test. But just as a point of reference, the more all the GMO varietals that the majority of whiskey houses are using today yield about 250 bushels per acre.
Okay.
So we're looking at a very, very small fraction of that yield.
So tell me a little bit about what does this heirloom corn, what does it lend to the bourbon in terms of a flavor profile that might be different than all that other bourbon that's being used?
Well, do I have a little bit of time to talk about how we ended up using this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So when the 70s rolled around and all this other GMO grain was starting to become used in mass production, this W225A actually fell completely out of production and would have gone extinct had it not been a hybrid developed by UW-Madison's Ag Research Department. So being a agricultural research university, they have a seed vault, which is essentially a temperature and humidity controlled bank vault full of all the hybrids that they've created over the years, and they refer back to those for research purposes. There's also one up in Norway or something in case there's a zombie apocalypse.
It's buried underground, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we're not talking about that one. We're just talking about the research university seed vault. But they held about 1,200 kernels in that vault, strictly for research purposes. So now we're going to fast forward to 2005, 2006, when my dad, who actually went down to Kentucky with the ADI Institute, the American Distilling Institute, did a tour around all these massive distilleries, and you just see corn getting shipped in from all over the United States. This is when he got the idea, being a lifelong farmer, a master agriculturalist in the state of Wisconsin, to start making bourbon using grains that we grow on our farm. Yeah. So he remembered the unique color, texture, everything of this W225A varietal. And the problem was it doesn't really exist anymore. So luckily, my mom was working as a professor at the university at the time. She kind of pulled some strings, used some of her connections, got us those same 1,200 kernels, which is pretty much what's in this jar, in this bottle, in a manila envelope, which is really not a lot of seed if you're trying to plant a bunch of acreage off of it. So they gave us those 1,200-ish kernels. We planted those into the ground, and over the course of 3 growing seasons, repopulated that specific strain of corn. And now we are the only people using that specific hybrid, and we are only growing it for our bourbon. The wheat and the rye are also propagated in a very similar way, also from parent strains from the UW. So everything is historically local to South Central Wisconsin, and that's really why we're talking about terroir and whiskey and what these grains do, what the climate does to affect different flavor profiles in that way.
Yeah, so when your bottle says Wisconsin straight bourbon whiskey, I mean, like, it doesn't get any more Wisconsin than what you guys are doing. I mean, you're using these strains of grain that are native to the area. You've basically brought them back to life from being dead, and now they're being used to produce this awesome product. So
thank you.
So you guys grow everything there, and you're using the corn, the rye, and the wheat from the farm in the mash bill. And you guys are, correct me if I'm wrong, but you are contract distilling it up the road from you guys? And
correct.
They're using your grains, and they're using your recipe to create the distillate.
Yeah, so kind of how we got into this, my dad being a savvy businessman and also a farmer, and also because he didn't want to make gin, he didn't want to make vodka, he just wanted to make high-quality bourbon, which is his favorite spirit to drink. When we set off on this path, he knew those three things. He didn't want to make gin, no vodka, and he wanted to make a high-quality bourbon. So in order to do that, you need a lot of capital when you buy a still, and a lot of craft distillers have to make some of those clear spirits to keep the lights on, so to say. We have, because we still farm upwards of 2,000 acres a year of seed corn, we didn't have that kind of capital to invest in a still of our own, which is why we contract distill with 45th Parallel. They've been really, really good to us. My dad actually met Paul Werney, the owner, on that American distilling trip to Kentucky. So yeah, we've been partners with them ever since. And if you want to try some of their stuff, they've got a great new Richmond rye, a great Wisconsin wheat, and a great border bourbon. Those are some of their whiskeys that they have. And I believe you can find them at some of the stores around Chicago. So shameless plug to 45th Parallel Distilling.
Well, that's nice of you, yeah.
Yeah, of course. Maybe get them on the next episode because they're great guys as well. So that's really how we were able to create a high-quality bourbon without a whole lot of additional infrastructure, so to say. The other main reason is that we age every single one of our barrels for a minimum of 5 years.
Yeah.
So, and we only use 53-gallon new charred white oak barrels that are seasoned for 24 months and also lightly toasted before a number 3 char.
Okay.
These are some, we tried to pull out all the stops. If you see other toasted barrel finishes on the market, maybe some seasoned wood finishes, those are going to be upwards of $200 to $300 a bottle, where we try and keep everything in the like $40 to $60 range for our entry level products. So all with those same benefits.
Yeah, this is amazing. I did not know that about the toasted barrel. So that's really, really cool information for people to know. Now, is that I don't have the 92 proof bourbon.
Small batch?
Yeah, is that on? Do you state that on the label that it's toasted barrel?
No, we do not. Just because so my mom actually designed all of our labeling, all of our packaging.
Super handsome, very cool.
And we really wanted to focus on a couple of things. Wisconsin, straight, 5 years old. And then obviously J. Henry. So once you start adding a lot of those additional details, it starts to get a little cluttered.
Yeah.
And so we really wanted to just be more of a clean and elegant label.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to compliment you guys on the design. I mean, I love these bottles like this. I call these like a slumped shoulder bottle. It's really just kind of a classic look and really a nice shape to it and really nice design. Which, I mean, design matters. Of course, what's inside ultimately matters the most. Which we'll get to.
We're gonna find out in a minute.
What's inside is really, really good, just so people know. But I want to talk to you a little bit more about some other stuff before we get to the tasting part. So
yeah, totally.
The 5-year aged 5 years is very, very interesting to me because, even though you guys don't have the cost of the still and all that, and you didn't need to rush out a product because you needed to recoup all this money, like, what's the thinking behind the 5 years? Because why not put it out at 4? That's the bottled in bond age. For a bourbon. So, why 5 years? Because that's pretty unique.
Yeah, so the really simple answer is my dad is kind of stubborn, and he knew that 4 years was the minimum to be bottled in bond, no age-stated bourbon, and he said, what the hell, let's just go at another year. That's also kind of where, as we're tasting through our product, we start to see what we call in blending and the bourbon industry and kind of whiskey in general, where that product really starts to turn a corner based on a lot of different factors, be it our climate, the barrels we use, the grains that we use, every sort of different thing, where you have a whiskey that kind of goes from being a little bit green, feeling a little fresh, still kind of having some of those new make textures and flavors to it, to turning around that corner and really becoming something that is a classic bourbon feel, something like having a lot of those typical textures and flavors to it.
So let's talk a little bit about then what's your production like in a given year? Like how much are you producing?
So the first couple of years, it was sort of funny. We were only putting away maybe 50 to 100 barrels a year. And that was really because we wanted to make sure that everything that we produced was going to be the highest quality. We wanted to make sure we got it right, that people liked it. And so we didn't want to just throw a bunch of barrels in a rick house and then 5 years later have everybody decide they didn't really like it. So we took a much more conservative approach by kind of slowly ramping up our production. But just to let you guys in on where we're at today, from that, maybe 100 barrels 10 years ago, this year our plan is to actually put about 1,000 barrels of bourbon away.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And also about 100 to 150 barrels of rye whiskey, which has not come out yet, so everybody stay tuned for that.
Okay.
It's going to actually be a inverse of our bourbon mash bill, so it'll be 60% of the Spooner rye that we use, 14% red heirloom corn, 14% wheat, and 12% malted barley. So that'll be a very cool 4-grain rye for everybody to look out for. And I don't have a release date yet. We're kind of dedicated to quality. So whenever it's ready, and we'll let you guys know when it's going to get bottled.
Okay, I know rye can be ready faster than bourbon, so are you sticking to the 5 years on the rye, or is that something that's going to come out before 5 years?
It's really hard to say. It's going to be ready when it's ready.
Okay, all right, I gotcha. I understand.
Yep. All
right, so your rick houses are interesting. I know that at least one of them was a dairy barn at one point in time that you guys converted into a rick house.
Yeah, can everybody see that? That's actually a building that was an original farmhouse on the property. It's a 100-year-old dairy barn that mostly, obviously, just held dairy cows before we took the farm over. And what a lot of people don't realize is bourbon barrels and cows have a lot in common, which they both need air to breathe and live. And so what we have is a very well ventilated barn that has a lot of really good airflow, so we can take advantage of the very, very volatile Wisconsin climate that we have, which we really think helps us in the production of our fine bourbon.
Well, yeah, I mean, I know what the weather is like there, being so close. I mean, you're in a given year, you're going to have temperature swings that are like literally over 100 degrees in the swing of the temperature. I mean, because you're getting below zero, and then you're getting up to over 100 degrees on some summer days up there. So that's really having a crazy effect on those barrels.
We actually found out earlier this year, a couple of months ago, that South Central Wisconsin had one of, if not the most volatile temperatures throughout the world this year. And what I mean by that is we had some of the highest ranges. So essentially what you were just talking about, Chris, in the summertime, we get 110 degrees. And then in the winter, if anybody was here in the Midwest and you guys remember having a polar vortex where it dropped almost below 50 degrees, that's almost 160 degrees of temperature volatility. So you don't age so much in the colder climates, but what we have also, instead of I'm going to just reference Kentucky since that's pretty much everybody's baseline for bourbon today. Kentucky they do have some temperature swings, but it's a much more gradual progression for their yearly climate. So they go from, maybe mid 30s to mid 40s in the wintertime. It never really snows there. And then it slowly creeps up as the summer comes around to that high 90s, 100 degrees. And then it kind of slowly drops back down. So you have a much more gradual progression of your temperature. What we have in Wisconsin is very, very sporadic, extremely volatile. I think in April of this year, there's actually a snow day, which is pretty crazy. Not an April Fool's joke by any means. But the interaction that has with the wood is extremely interesting on how it affects our bourbon. So when you have something as hot as an 80-degree summer day in April, that those barrels in those oak staves are really going to open up. They're going to allow the bourbon to seep into that seasoned, toasted, charred oak and absorb all that flavor. And then when it drops, maybe upwards of 50 to 70 degrees in a day sometimes, you have those oak staves pretty much constricting and squeezing that liquid back into a barrel like a sponge. And then the next day happens and it's back up to 60 and you have that absorption again. So that's why, even though a lot of people think 5 years is a little young, it might be sort of young for a Kentucky bourbon, but we find that that's really kind of the sweet spot, like I said, where it turns the corner because we have that volatility of those temperature swings.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. And you guys do a 7-year product, correct?
Yeah, that's a pretty limited release right now just because, as we were talking, those were some of the oldest barrels that we had. And when we first started this, it was more of kind of a passion project for my mom and my dad. They didn't expect it to take off as much as it did, so we were kind of just bottling as we get older. Now, like you said, it's my full-time job. Hopefully my little brother wants to jump into this as well. And my mom's not too worried about her retirement fund just going into a bunch of barrels in a rick house that we'll never see anything from. So,
well, you need your little brother to join so you can get some of the load off of yourself, right?
Yeah, I need another sales rep. I got 3 states to myself right now. So
yeah, so talk about that a little bit. Talk about your distribution and like your plans for what's ahead for the distribution.
Yeah, definitely. So right now we're primarily focused on just the Midwest. Obviously, Wisconsin being our home market, we really, really need to keep them happy. And then, Illinois and Minnesota, they're our great neighbors. And being from Wisconsin, we really love drinking with our neighbors. So we want everybody to get along. So those are really the three states that we're in right now. And that's where our primary focus is going to be until we start getting more product coming of age.
I love that. I think that's super smart strategy for you guys. And I like that when I go into stores here now that I see your product more and more on shelves, not just at like Binny's. I see it in some other places too, in some of the smaller accounts. So it's really cool to see. Now let's talk a little bit about like your facility there in Wisconsin. I know you guys have a tasting room there.
Mm-hmm. So we have a tasting room, which is actually the original farmhouse on the property. So it's the house that my grandpa and grandma actually purchased and lived in. It's the original farmhouse that my dad grew up in.
Wow.
It's also the house that I almost burned down by lighting off fireworks as a kid. So it's a surprise that it's still up and standing. But we converted the entire building into our tasting room and visitor center. So my dad's living room is now a bar. So if you guys want to come check this out, and I'll mention this also at the end of the show, if you guys want to sign up for a tour, we're about 2 to 2.5 hours outside of Chicago, 20 to 30 minutes north of Madison. And for anybody that signs up using the code Urban Bourbonist, cheers to Chris, we'll give you a free tour, so like a buy one, get one, and I'll throw in a glass as well. So
wow, that's very cool. Thank you for doing that. So guys, make sure that if you're in the area, take a trip up there, use the code Urban Bourbonist when you book your tour, and you'll get a buy one, get one, and Joe will even throw in a glass for you as well. Joe, where can they find you online?
So we are at jhenryandsons.com. The easiest way to sign up for that tour is to just go through our website, sign up with that. There's not really a promo code or anything. We're not super sophisticated yet. I was joking around with Chris even before this that even being a millennial, I'm pretty technologically challenged. So all those emails actually do come to me, though. So if you just mention in the description of your tour, we ask if you're having a celebration, birthday, anything like that. Just say, hey, Saryan Urban Bourbonist, we want to set up a tour. Our hours are Thursday afternoon, so I think like 2 and 4 are the tour times. Friday afternoon is also 2 and 4. Saturday and Sunday is noon, 2 and 4. And then Monday, we do have tours by appointment, and we mostly reserve that so that some of you industry folks out there on your day off can come and visit us as well.
That's very cool. Well, I appreciate you offering that to everyone that's viewing tonight. So just for everyone that's come in and is watching and has joined the broadcast, I'm talking to Joe Henry from J. Henry and Sons. They are located just north of Madison in Dane, Wisconsin. Joe is owner, sales lead, blending specialist, and many other things for the company. A small distillery up there. You can find them in Illinois, in Wisconsin, and Minnesota now. So try and find them if you can. If you know somebody that's living in these states, reach out to them and have them find you a bottle and send it to you. Joe, can anyone buy your stuff online? I thought at one point you were on sealbox.com.
Correct. So Steelbox will sometimes have our product in stock. I just tried to fill out a purchase order for them, so they should be having some in time for the holidays. and that's probably the best spot for now, as a lot of people have been cracked down on from the TTB. So if you do have the opportunity, everybody out there, there's a couple interesting things going on with the alcohol industry and just our lobbying with our political officials in general. The biggest is primarily being what's called the federal excise tax. Which 2 years ago was $13 or in change per proof gallon. And a proof gallon is a gallon of spirits distilled to 50% alcohol. It's more of just like a measuring block so that they can tax us all. And 2 years ago, with the boom of the craft spirits industry, the federal government actually lowered that from $13 and change to around $2 and change per proof gallon, which has really allowed a lot of small craft distilleries like ours and maybe some of your other favorites to expand and create more delicious juice that you guys love. So if you love craft spirits and you love this industry, it's actually going to expire at the first of next year. So please, it's super easy. Send an email to your state and local representatives and just say you really want that federal excise tax reduction to be a permanent boon for the industry.
That's great information. Yeah, so definitely I'm going to do that when we get off here. I will definitely.
Yeah, totally. Thank you, Chris.
So let's go to the next part of the show that I always like to do with my guests, and that's tasting the whiskey that
the fun stuff.
Yeah. So let's taste first. So I have here the cask. This is the cask strength.
Definitely.
It's
the Patent Road Reserve.
Yes, the Patent Road Reserve. Mine is batch number 3. I don't know if people can see.
Oh, wow.
So this is batch 3. It is 56.8% alcohol. So we're looking at almost 100. It's 100 and almost 114 proof. This is bottle 734. So how old is batch number 3?
So a couple of funny stories with that. Being a single barrel cask strength product, this is actually a label that kind of snuck through the TTB. We've since changed our label. So this is what the new label looks like. I'm drinking barrel 346, bottle 120, which is how we changed everything. So where did you find that, Chris? Because that's a historical one I might need to get off of you soon.
Yeah, this is from, let me think where I bought this. I bought this at Garfield's.
Nice.
On Milwaukee, so close to you.
Yeah, that's right down the street from my place. Yeah. And I know the guys there, and they actually stashed a couple of their original purchases from about 3 years ago.
Okay.
And they just started putting them out once that store was opened earlier this year. So.
Well, I think, I'm pretty sure that's where I got this cask strength one. So let's give this a taste. Again, it's almost 114 proof. I really like that cask strength.
Yeah. So all of our single barrels are essentially that. When we're doing all of our tasting and blending, There's no real scientific way. You just kind of have to taste through everything, which is a tough job, to say the least. But as we're tasting through everything, we pick out barrels for our small batch. We pick out barrels for our Bellefontaine Reserve, which we're going to taste next. And then we find the really, really special barrels that are just so good on their own that they don't need to be put into a blend. They don't need to be proofed down at all. They're really just beautiful expressions and the purest expressions of our product, pretty much coming straight out of the cask. So those are the barrels that we're going to either bottle right at 5 years, right at cask strength, which my particular one is at 59.47, it looks like. And most of these are really going to fall in that range. We haven't bottled one lower than that, like 114, which you got. But we have gotten some that are all the way up to the 130 range. So keep your eyes open. Yeah. But even with that high of a proof, I really like to think of this whiskey as being somewhat of a surprise to people. If you're used to drinking high proof spirits, then it might not come as a surprise. But really for some of the people that are maybe trying to get into that higher proof game, this is going to be something that's extremely approachable, even though it does have that rich high proof.
I was going to say that this does not drink like 114 proof. Like it does not. I mean, it goes down like, I'll say, dangerously easy.
Yeah.
For being 114 proof. So what I like to do is just kind of like give a few like notes on what I smell and what I taste. So for this guy, this cask strength Patent Road Reserve that I have, it's like I get a lot of like clovey and caramel notes, and like even like a cereal, like a cereal note on the nose, and I do get like that rye spice comes forward for me on this, and there's even like a touch of mintiness on the nose. Mm-hmm. It's got a lot going on the nose.
Yeah, I mean, and typically, so if you ever come to our tasting room, or if you ever see me kind of out in the market, I'm not a big fan of sharing my personal tasting notes, but I'm going to do it today. The reason I do that is because when I'm trying something with somebody who's not as familiar as Chris with our product, I really want you to experience it for your own palate. And what I mean by that is my palate is extremely different from Chris's. We have very, very different histories growing up and different experiences based off of what you smell and taste throughout your life. So that's really what defines your palate, and sort of why if you meet me out in the market, I'm not going to share my tasting notes with you, because I don't want to alter your opinion on what you're tasting. Yeah, I want you to have the purest expression of what your palate is. And really, I mean, whiskey's meant to be enjoyed, and I don't want to be a dick. So if I tell you I'm tasting cherries and figs and you don't taste that, then you might think like, oh my God, am I doing something wrong? Right. I really just want people to enjoy this whiskey, enjoy it for what it is. But since I am doing a lot of the blending now, I'll share with kind of what we're looking for in this, primarily more than just tasting notes. So we want this bourbon to have the characteristics that are traditional now for J. Henry, which are really, really dark stone fruit flavors. So what I'm looking for is like a lot of dried figs, dried plums, even maybe some like pomegranates are in there. Then it's going to kind of follow along the nose, and the palate is having some of your more traditional bourbon flavors with a really thick caramel, really thick vanillas, but also a little bit of that cinnamon and clove and some of that minty note that you have, Chris.
Yeah.
The final really kind of things that define these for me are going to be stuff along the lines of like cocoa nibs and mocha, and also like what I find when I drink really good rye whiskey is a very, very strong like cherry bomb.
Yeah.
Which I also get because of the rye influence of this bourbon. So, like I said, please don't let that define your J. Henry experience. If you would like, please share your own personal tasting notes with us on our Instagram page. Feel free to send us a DM because we're always curious as to what people are tasting. The biggest example I have is that Chris's grandmother might make oatmeal raisin cookies. My grandmother might make chocolate chip cookies. This bourbon could both taste like grandmother's cookies to us.
It's true. It's totally true. And you can follow J. Henry and Sons at J. Henry Bourbon on Instagram. So I'll just tell you what I taste. First off, it has a really rich mouthfeel to it, which I really like. It coats my whole mouth, and I get like a nice heat, like cinnamons and some pepper. But I get some orange peel, some mintiness, and then you were talking about the cocoa nibs and all that. And in the finish, I get like cornmeal followed by chocolate in the finish.
Oh yeah,
that's awesome. So good. And the finish is like. There is a long finish on this thing. It like lingers. Yeah. It's like still sitting on like the back of my mouth and on the back of my tongue. Really, really interesting whiskey for sure. It's super complex, and like we were saying before, it does not drink to the high of a proof that it is. It's very approachable. It's very easy to drink.
Thank you, Chris. And another cool thing that I'll urge people to try is because this is a single barrel product, each barrel is going to have its own unique characteristics to it.
Yes.
This is what's really, really fun for me is to, we have sort of those profiles, those general profiles and ideas of where this flavor profile is going to go. However, if you try this barrel side by side with my barrel, like what we're doing, not only are we going to have different palates to define that flavor, but each barrel is like a completely different child.
Totally.
Nobody out there has favorite kids. You just have children that are better or worse at different things, like my mom tells me, because I'm not the favorite. I'm the older one. So my brother's the favorite.
You were the one that had to blaze the trail for your brother, so he had it easy.
Yeah, he's going to get the easy job, right? Yeah. All right. I also like this because of the high proof. Add a couple drops of water. That'll really, really help open this up. And I know we're kind of running low on time, but maybe if we just want to finish it off with a small drop of water and really just see how that opens it up.
I'll put a couple drops in mine. So, yeah, when I put some water in there, the nose is like smoky and sweet.
Right. It just blows up.
Super smoky and sweet. Wow, that totally changed the aroma profile.
It's like a whole new whiskey you can experiment with. I really like doing this with everything I try, just because it adds another level of the experience you get to enjoy as drinking whiskey.
It also kind of brought out more of the barrel characteristics when I tasted it too. So a little bit more smokiness, and a lot more chocolate when I put the water in. So really amazing. Yes, definitely do that if you're trying this. All right, Joe, let's go to the Bellefontaine. This is also cask strength as well, correct? If I could talk.
Yeah, that patent road is creeping up on you, right?
Yeah, right.
So this is not actually a cask strength bourbon.
Oh, okay. Well,
it is a high proof whiskey, though. It's over 50%. And real quick, because I know we're kind of running low on time, I'll explain briefly the process of how this is made. So what we do is take cognac barrels, because Henry, my great-grandfather actually moved over here from France and purchased a small farm in southwestern Wisconsin named Bellefontaine Farms, meaning beautiful fountain farms in French, because there was an artisanal spring on there that he actually used to irrigate his crops with and water his livestock. So our Bellefontaine Reserve is really an ode to tying our French heritage to our Wisconsin bourbon, by getting used French cognac casks shipped over to us, and finishing our 5-year cask strength bourbon in those barrels. Now, where we take this kind of a step further is not only are we using those cognac casks, but we're also using a French blending technique that was pioneered by some of the cognac distillers, called slow reduction. It's a very work-intensive process, so luckily my brother, because he's not on the road as much as me, gets stuck doing this task. But I'll try and explain this very, very quickly, because it is a really, really cool process that I think we're the only bourbon producer doing right now. So essentially what we do is, while that bourbon is sitting in those cognac casks, what we've done a few years ago is, in order to proof this, we're not using regular water, which will get you the consistency and a flavor and proof, which is really the main reason blenders proof stuff. But it unfortunately dilutes the final flavor of your product. That's just a necessary evil in the industry. People accept it, and it's something we all got to do. That's also why we came out with the Patent Road, because it's unadulterated, not proofed down at all, purest expression. So the Bellefontaine is going to be sort of a mixture of those two theories, so to say, where we want to get that consistency of proof and flavor, but we also don't want to dilute the final product. So what we do is, instead of using regular water, we actually refill some of our ex-bourbon casks about halfway with distilled water, fortify that water in the cask to about 30 to 40% alcohol with our 5-year-old bourbon. And then we do that for a couple of reasons. We don't want it to rot. We don't want it to freeze in the wintertime. And because it still has a little bit of alcohol as a flavor extractor, it'll still age and extract flavor from our used bourbon cask, because we're going to age these barrels for about 3 to 4 years. We now have a product. Yeah, that's why it's kind of fun to talk about, because I think it's pretty unique in the industry. So now we have a product that's called Petit O, which just means little water in this French blending slow reduction technique. And we use that Petit O to slowly reduce the proof of our Bellefontaine while it's sitting in that cognac cask. So really, really slowly, pouring maybe a gallon at a time of that Petit O and bringing it from cask strength with the Patent Road at about 120 to 130, all the way down to where this particular batch sits at about 106.
Yeah, the one that I have is 52.93, so 106. So you're really not bringing it down that, well, I guess it depends, but you're not really bringing it down that far. But the way that you're bringing it down is such a unique process that you're not taking away from the original bourbon that's in the barrel.
Exactly. So we're finding a way to get to our consistent flavor profile, get to our consistent proof among the batch, but instead of diluting your final product, you're actually layering in another flavor through that proofing process, which is what makes this product so cool and unique.
Dude, I have to tell you, this Bellefontaine Reserve is ridiculous.
Thanks.
And just so that people know, and I know that awards or whatever. People have different opinions about awards. This won a double gold at San Francisco World Spirits. I mean, this is an outstanding expression. I mean, the flavors that come out of this are just, like I said, are just ridiculous. I mean, so I'm just going to tell you.
We also got one for the Patton Road.
Yes, and for the Patton Road as well. So I'm just going to briefly go through my notes on this because I am so impressed with this whiskey. Not that I'm not impressed with the other one. The other one is amazing as well.
Mm-hmm.
But, like this is so complex. There's like grape juice, there's vanilla, there's like this citrus, there's all these dark red fruits on the nose, and like a little black pepper spiciness on the nose. And then when you drink it, oh my God, when you drink this thing, it is just, you can tell that the cognac barrels are there, but they are not overpowering the bourbon at all. It is not overpowering the bourbon at all. It's just accenting like what you guys put into the barrel. There's just those notes of like some grape juice, some citrus, and then like this really beautiful like floral honey. And then at the end, I get this like cherry Jolly Rancher flavor.
Yeah,
which
I can
is
see
just
that.
So amazing. This is such a good expression. I mean, you guys knocked it out of the park on this.
Thank you.
And coming in at like 106 proof, it drinks really well. It's super easy to drink, super approachable, and has like that complexity that, I mean, I could give this to someone that is not a bourbon drinker and be like, hey, do you if someone said, hey, give me something to try that would like turn me on to bourbon.
Yeah.
This is something that I would give someone that is not a bourbon drinker and say, hey, try this because of the complexity and all those different flavors. Yeah, bourbon. There's someone on here saying that I just had a bourbon-gasm. Yeah, I'm telling you guys, this expression from J. Henry and Sons is out of this world. It really is. And I was saying on Instagram today, I did a post about our live tonight, and I was talking about the company, and people were commenting, and I said I would put these two whiskeys up against really almost anything that's out in the marketplace.
Thank you.
I mean, I spent my own money on these. Like, I'm not. I'm saying
not paid advertising.
I really think that these are great products. And,
Thank you.
And this Bellefontaine is just like, it's out of this world. It's really, really awesome. You guys have absolutely killed it on these.
Yeah, thank you so much for the kind words, Chris. We do work very hard to create an extremely high quality product for everybody. And that's really what we're all about. We've created high quality seed for my dad's whole life, for his dad's whole life, and now we're translating that expertise to the third generation on the property to creating a high quality spirit using those high quality grains.
It's really awesome. I mean, what you guys have done in the short period of time that your whiskey has been available is really, it's really unique. And it's really admirable the way that you guys have decided to go about growing the business. First off, starting with 5 years as your baseline and then going from there. So really cheers to you guys. It's really amazing. And so
cheers to all of you. Thank you.
Let's mention again, we've only got a couple minutes left here. Joe, thank you very much for coming on. This is an awesome conversation. There's been a lot of comments. People have really enjoyed this conversation. You provided a lot of really cool information about the process and about the family history. So for people that want to take a tour at J. Henry and Sons, head up there, go to Dane, Wisconsin. Look them up, jhenryandsons.com. Book a tour. If you use Urban Bourbonist, they will give you a buy one, get one free. And Joe said he'll even throw in a glass for you as well. Check them out online. Check sealbox.com. Joe said that there should be some things available as we get closer to the holidays. So check out Sealbox. Check out J. Henry and Sons. Follow them at J. Henry Bourbon on Instagram. Anything else you want to add, Joe? We've got like about a minute left.
Yeah. Once again, go try and promote that FET tax reduction. That federal excise tax reduction is huge for people in my industry. And if you love craft spirits, please, please, please write or call your state and local representatives, because this really affects everybody in the United States that's in this industry. And it affects the quality of product that we as craft spirits producers can provide for you guys. So thank you so much for your time. Really hope you enjoyed everything. And yeah, thank you so much, Chris, for having me on.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Thanks for coming on, and take care. We'll have to do this again soon, but have a great night, and thank you very much.
Definitely. Thank you. I'll be back.
Cheers.
Cheers.
All right, guys, hope you enjoyed that. Thank you very much for watching tonight. And that's it from the Urban Bourbon Bunker. I'm Chris, the Urban Bourbonist. Until next time, I'll check you later. Cheers.